Hello students. So welcome students to this session now. So students, let's start in the today's class. The last lecture that we have discussed, students, we have already taken into account, if you remember in the last discussion, in the computation of total income. In the computation of the total income, we were discussing about what? About the classification of the total income. So the very fact that the first and the foremost step happens to be the classification. Now, as far as the classification is concerned, students, you all are aware of the fact that the first step is about the specific charge, and once a specific charge is done, which is can either be unconditional or conditional based charge, then thereafter the balance qualifying income. In respect of the balance qualifying income, the chargeability will be determined. The balance qualifying income, students, the chargeability will be determined as per the general charging section of each and every heads of income. As per the general charging section of each and every heads of income. This is the criteria, or I can say this is the threshold of the computation of the balance qualifying income. That is what we have seen so far, students, isn't it? Now, just pay attention to this point. So students, in this context, we have seen up till now the general charging section of the head salary, wherein any particular amount that has been received in consequence of the employment, that particular amount will be chargeable under the head salary. Second, what was the most important one was about the head house property. The general charging section laid down in the first section, that is section 22. As per that section 22, if the following conditions are satisfied, then the annual value of the house property, will be classified under the head house property, and they are: the SSC should be the owner of the house property, the property should consist of building or land appurtenant thereto, and the SSC should not be carrying on the business or profession in such house property. If all these following three conditions are satisfied, we will say and conclude that the annual value of the house property will be classified under the head house property. Couple of important case law, students, that we have discussed in our previous lecture, and that was in respect of one being Raj Dadarkar and Associate, if you can recall that particular judgment, and another one was about the Chennai Properties and Investment Limited. Raj Dadarkar and Associates, and another one was the Chennai Properties and Investment Limited. So these were certain important judgments, students, that we have discussed. In the context of Chennai Properties and Investment Limited, one of the points that emerged was that when the SSC is having a business of developing the property for the purpose of its let out, then in that particular case what? Then in that particular case, the rental income that the SSC has earned will not be classified under the head house property, but will be classified under the head PGBP. The main important reason is that why it cannot be classified under the head house property. So it cannot be classified under the head house property because what? Because the SSC through that particular house property is still conducting its business. And what is the business of the SSC? The business of leasing. So the business of leasing. So in that regard, if the business is that of leasing, then the lease rental that the SSC is receiving, that will be charged under the head PGBP and not under the head house property. This is what we have discussed in Chennai Properties and Investment Limited. The second judgment, students, that we have discussed, was in respect of what? The case of, just forget it, that judgment Raj Dadarkar. But before that, what we have discussed was a builder whose business is that of building the business for the purpose of sale. Students, building the business for the purpose of sale. And if that particular builder, if he is the one who is letting out the property instead of the sale, if he is doing the let out of the property, then we have concluded that for a builder who holds the house property for the builder who holds the house property as his stock in trade, then in that regard the rental income arising from the let out, of the house property will be classified under the head house property. Because leasing is not the business, it is the sale of the house property which is the business of the SSE. So therefore, since leasing is not the business of the SSE, accordingly the SSE cannot be said to be carrying out the business in its house property, and hence the lease rental will be classified under the head IFHP and not under the head PGBP. Against that, we have done couple of amendments, students, if you can recall that also, and the couple of amendments that we have discussed. Actually, there is only one amendment. The amendment originally was of Finance Act 2018, which again got modified to Finance Act 2019. The year got increased, and that was the GAV of the house property held as stock in trade will be considered as nil for a period of 2 years from the end of the financial year in which the completion certificate is received, provided the SSE has not given the house property on rent at any point of time during the previous year. So if this condition is satisfied, then in that case the annual value or the GAV of the house property will be considered as nil for a period of up to 2 years. So this is the discussion that we had, students, so far. And now then, Raj Dadarkar also we have considered in our discussion. Raj Dadarkar also we have considered in this context, and in Raj Dadarkar and Associates Limited, Supreme Court. What is that discussion that we had, students? First of all, the partnership firm happened to be the deemed owner of that particular house property. So that one point we have already taken into account, that the partnership firm happened to be a deemed owner. Second one, the firm also had given that particular building on rent, against which they have classified the rental income under the head PGBP instead of the head house property. So again, we have looked for 2 points. Number one was the partnership deed, and that was inconclusive. The way it was being written, partnership deed, it was very inconclusive. And thereafter what? Even the firm and its partner have failed to establish that rental income from letting out of the house property forms a substantial part of its total income. Rental income from letting out of the house property forms substantial part of its total income, and therefore the Supreme Court went on to conclude that this rental income will be classified under the head house property and not under the head PGBP. So the case law of Chennai Properties and Investment Limited was being distinguished in this particular judgment of Raj Dadarkar and Associates. So students, just you need to know how the case laws are being read. That is so important. Now on this backdrop, this is what we have done up till part A. Now let's continue to part B. The new case law, which I'll discuss with all of you. One is, again, now this I'm not going to make you write. It is already given in our material. So students, I'm not herein providing you this, but just making the reference of the name. And that is about Tamil Nadu, tourism, I suppose this was discussed in the last lecture, students. Can you just confirm this? Tamil Nadu Tourism and Development Corporation, Madras High Court. Was it discussed? No, I don't think this wasn't discussed. Up till Raj Dadarkar and Associate. I think we have discussed the case law. So let's look upon to this particular judgment. Tamil Nadu Tourism and Development Corporation students. So what was the discussion in this particular? Yes, sir. Yeah, Harish. So we haven't discussed this. Let's discuss this one out. So here was a case, students. The assessee was a local authority, as the name suggests. Tamil Nadu Tourism and Development Corporation. So assessee was a local authority. Now, being a local authority, it has the business of the assessee was what? Being a local authority, the business of the assessee was to give the property on rent. Meaning, sorry, not that one. It was the tourism was a business of the assessee. Tourism. Now, if you know, students, that each state government has its own tourism department. Each of the state government have the tourism. They promote tourism. In every state government promotes tourism in its state. Twinfold objective. Number one, primarily it will fetch revenue to the government because the local authority operates within the ambit of the state government. And the second particular part, students, is about what? The so first one is about the fact that it promotes it fosters the revenue of the state government, and second one is also creates the local employment. So that is the objective why the tourism is what primarily they will always hold on to their particular within their ambit, within their control, and that is the job of the local authorities. So even in Tamil Nadu, we have this Tamil Nadu Tourism and Development Corporation, which had various resorts spread across the state, Kodaikanal and various locations. So they had in various locations, they had this their resorts spread across the entire state. Now what has happened, students, was that some of their interior properties or interior location, they were finding it quite difficult. They were finding it what? Quite difficult to let out this particular property. Meaning to run that particular hotel unit in the interior side, they were quite finding it difficult. One was the fact that it was on the interior side, and second one, the local competition was quite high. So they were not in a position to effectively manage those hotel units. So what they did was that they in fact accordingly made an franchisee agreement in respect of their selected hotel units. And therefore they entered into the franchisee agreement with these particular they entered into the franchisee agreement with these particular the local players. As per the terms of the agreement, students, pay attention. As per the terms of the agreement, the hotel the franchisees will be conducting the same business, and the same business was the hotel business. So same business will be conducted in those particular properties. That is number one. Second, the hotel business would be conducted in the name of the SSC, that is Tamil Nadu Tourism and Development Corporation Limited. So they will not change the name. They will continue to operate the hotel business under the flagship, under the name of Tamil Nadu Tourism Development Corporation Limited. And the next particular point was, what was the next particular point? That because our name was involved, our name means Tamil Nadu Tourism Development Corporation names was being involved. Therefore, as per the terms of the contract, they ensured that the franchisees will have a minimum standard of facilities, which would be there in those hotel units, since the SSC's name is in the stake. So accordingly, on that basis, the franchisee agreement was being entered. As per the agreement, the franchisee were supposed to give to the SSC, the Tourism Development Corporation, rupees 1 lakh per month. So that was a fixed payment which the franchisee were supposed to give to the SSC. The SSC in this case classified this particular income under the head house property, whereas the department sought to classify this particular income under the head PGBP. What is your take, students? Under which particular head it will be classified and why? Make an attempt. In which particular head it will be classified and why is it so? All the GDRF students, gear up, get your answers and reasons as near as possible in this case. So what I have said to you, SSC had classified this particular rent, this fixed 1 lakh per month under the head house property, whereas the department in the course of the assessment, they have classified this particular income under the head PGBP. What do you think, who is correct in this context and why? So the classification in this regard, students, as per the Madras High Court, the classification should be under the head. Which head? Under the head PGBP and not under the head house property. Why is it so? Because going by the terms of the franchisee agreement, it was now very clear that the SSC, who is SSC? The local authorities. The SSC continued to do their business in those properties through the franchisee model. So they are continuing to do the business in those particular property, but now through a franchisee model. So accordingly, we can say that the SSC is engaged or conducting or doing the business in those particular property units, and hence the condition for the purpose of chargeability under section 22 will not be satisfied, isn't it? And that exactly was the clincher. Why? The classification will be under the head PGBP and not under the head house property. The question therefore is, why is it that the SSC is so interested to get it classified under the head? Under which head? Under the head house property instead of the head PGBP. Why is it so that the SSC was so much keen to get it classified under the head house property instead of getting it classified under the head PGBP? The reason was very clear, students. The reason was that he knew that there is a fixed 1 lakh per month that he is going to receive, So therefore, if I can classify this particular amount under the head house property, at least I would be eligible for a standard deduction of 30%. Whereas if I take it down to PGBP, then there is no corresponding deduction that will be available to me. And that was the motivation for the SSC to classify this particular income under the head. Under which head? Under the head house property. So this is why the classification, students, were being done. The classification which was being done in this particular judgment of Tamil Nadu Tourism and Development Corporation, in this context, this classification they have said and they have concluded what? That it should be done under this particular heads of income. Under which head? Under the head PGBP. Fine, students. So this is again an important case law, students, that can be expected so far as your examination is concerned. It is also covered by the SSC. It is also covered by the ICI. In their case law module, they have already covered this particular judgment. So students, just be very careful about the same. So this is already covered in your notes, so I'm not making you write. So far as this particular case law is concerned, it is already there. I just thought of explaining you this case law so that you will know exactly what is the crux of this important judgment. What is the crux of this particular important judgment? Now students, we have done 3 case laws in part A2 and right now 1 case laws in this part B. And in all the 3 case law, we were trying to decide based on the general charging section. As to what would be the appropriate head between the two. And the two heads were house property or PGBP. So that was our sole focus as to selecting which would be the appropriate head where the classification will be done. House property or under the head PGBP, for which these 3 case laws is what we have referred. Now, as I told you in part A also, we will now bring across the capital gains and PGBP angle. For this, students, this was the case. Please take a note of this one. Chand Goyal. Now this case law I will make you right. MP High Court. MP High Court judgment. MP High Court judgment. Through this, now let me give you the facts of the case. First of all, fact of the case, students. Fact of the case was, here was the SSE who has inherited. Here was the SSE who has inherited a large plot of land. So they have inherited a large plot of land. Now the SSE was finding itself a huge difficulty to dispose of this particular land. Obviously, when you have got a huge land, then you will also find very less buyers or the less takers for this land. If you had a very small plot of land, then definitely the buyer would also be quite large. But this is the real challenge when you have got a huge land, huge plot of land. And this is what this SSE was stuck. Having a huge plot of land, he was finding itself very difficult to dispose of the same. He was finding it very difficult to dispose of the same. So after making a lot of attempts, he finally has given up. And thereafter what? Thereafter, once he came to know that all the buyers who were approaching only for a particular plot in that land. They were not asking for the entire land. So what this SSE did was, he started on then as per what the buyer required. So he made the plot available. He made the land available to sell. He made the land available to be sold in plots. To be sold in plots. Originally, his proposition was to sell the entire piece of land in one go. But finding it difficult to sell the entire plot of land in one go, he thereafter called for whom? He thereafter called for this particular category, whereby he called for this tender, and on the basis of which he made himself available to sell the land in plots. And as per what the buyers started approaching him, they started telling that this is the area of the land that they want. He gradually started disposing of the land in plots. Okay, once in over a period of time, he has sold the entire land itself. Over a period of time, he have sold the entire land itself. In the meantime, at the context of the computation, in the meantime, when he was doing the computation for the purpose of determining his total income, the head that he classified this transfer, this gain, was the head capital gains. So the chargeability that he did was under the head capital gains. First of all, I just wanted to clarify, this was not a rural agricultural land. So somebody is having any such thought that, sir, there is a definition of capital asset which exclude rural agricultural land. So I should just let you know, it was not a case of a rural agricultural land. Okay. So therefore, the SSE has classified the gain under the head CG, undertook the computation of capital gains, and since the asset was a long-term capital asset, we all know the benefit of indexation was being applied, and whatever was the long-term capital gain so computed, which was included in the total income, on that long-term capital gains he applied the tax rate of 20%. The concessional tax rate of 20% was being applied. On that basis, he has made the payment of the tax to the government. Definitely, department didn't like that. In the course of the assessment, what the department did was, they classified this particular income under the head PGBP. What the department did, they classified this income under the head PGBP, and if you classify this income under the head PGBP, then what will be the consequence? The first consequence, we all know, there is no indexation under the head PGBP. The second consequence that was there, the tax rate was the normal tax rate, and since he was already in the 30% bracket, therefore the assessing officer has asked for the additional liability through a notice of demand. Therefore the question was whether the department was justified in classifying this particular income under the PGBP. Now many of you, or in fact all of you, would be wondering that from where this PGBP head came. Primarily, that was a shocker for us. That PGBP head came, students, because of the definition of the term business. Because of what? Because of the definition of the term business. Now, students, the term business as defined, definition is there under section 2 clause 13, 1-3. So, business has been defined something like this. I'll make you write, but just first try to capture the essence of the case law. So, the business has been defined something like this. It means what? It means trade, commerce and manufacture, and it includes what? Any adventure in the nature of trade, commerce and manufacture. It means trade, commerce or manufacture, and it includes any adventure in the nature of trade, commerce and manufacture. So students, the bottom line is this: the definition of the term business, it includes even adventure. So therefore the AO got inspired with this particular word, adventure. And you can think, what is adventure? Even a single adventure does not mean that you are supposed to do recurring activities. There is no such condition. Even though the activity is one off that you have done, even though the activity is a single activity that you have done, it's not that you have done some recurring activities, only a single activity that you have done throughout your life, even that can be considered as an adventure. So therefore the AO has put forth this proposition that even though this was inherited land and you have sold the land over a period of time in plots, doesn't matter, and thereafter once the entire land was sold, thereafter you never undertook anything which has to do with real estate, doesn't matter, it can still qualify as an adventure. And the fact that the term adventure is covered in the definition of business, therefore the chargeability in respect of such gain will be attracted under the head PGBP as against the head capital gains. This was the counter argument made by whom? Made by the department. So therefore the question that was there was this, that whether this classification, can this be done under the head PGBP or under the head CG? First chance to all of you students, which would be the appropriate head that you think where it should be classified? Should it be classified under the head PGBP or it should be classified under the head CG? It would be classified under the head. Yes, indeed. In this context, the students are saying capital gains is where it should be classified. But the real challenge is at the same time, I also agree that yes, students, primarily it is a capital gains where it would be classified. But at the same time, what is the counter that we will give it to the assessing officer who is hell-bent that I will classify this income only under the head? Which head? Only under the head PGBP. What is the counter that we will give? Because he is putting his money on the definition of business, and as per the definition of business, he is picking up that word adventure. So what is the counter that we have to give to this particular assessing officer who wants to drag the liability of the assessee on a higher side by denying him one indexation and also putting his rate of tax also on a higher side? What is the counter, students, that you can think of it? So students, the counter that you will all think of it in this context would be, first of all, be careful. Like in the definition of the term business, merely an adventure by itself cannot qualify as a business. Anil, merely an adventure by itself cannot qualify as what? As a business. If an adventure has to qualify as a business, it should be also in the nature of trade, commerce and manufacture. What is the definition? What I have told you, I'll make you write, but just try to pick it up, students. What is the definition which I have told you? Business means a trade, commerce and manufacture, and it also includes adventure in the nature of trade, commerce and manufacture. Now what you are doing presently is chartered accountancy. Even that is an adventure. You're doing chartered accountancy is what? Is nothing but Nikhil. You're doing chartered accountancy is nothing but an adventure. Can I therefore say you are doing a business? And the answer is no. The business, it will be only if the adventure is in the nature of trade, commerce and manufacture. Only then it will become a business. And therefore not all the adventure that has been pursued becomes a business. It is only the adventure which is in the nature of trade, commerce and manufacture that shall constitute as a business. So therefore the question is, what do you mean by the term trade? It therefore boils down to understand the real meaning. To understand the real meaning of the term trade, it boils down to understand the real meaning of the term business, it boils down to understanding the term trade. So what is trade? That is where you actually get settled down now. People will say, so trade means buying and selling for a consideration. It's so simple to say that, isn't it? And if it is buying and selling for a consideration, then may I then tell you that even in this case, there can be an angle of trade that can be there, because he is also selling for a consideration kind of a thing. So therefore, to just say that buy and sell for a consideration is a trade is not a proper way to highlight the activity. Therefore, what is then the trade? So students, pay attention to this point. What is the trade? Please pay attention to this particular point now. Trade means any activity which is carried out systematically, any activity which is carried out systematically by applying what? Applying skill, labor and resources with a view to earn profit thereon. An activity which is carried out systematically, by applying skill, labor and resources with a view to earn profit thereon, that is what is trade. Systematic activity is what we need to focus upon. And now you just see here, students, here in this particular case, was the SSC, we have to identify that whether the SSC in this regard, was he carrying an activity in a systematic manner? And therefore you couldn't find that the answer was no. He was making the land available for the purpose of sale as per what the buyer wants. I never had any plan as to how I am going to dispose of this particular land. Let the buyer come to my land and decide what he wants. I will carve out the plot and register that plot in his name. This is what I am going to do. There was never any plan beforehand for the purpose of selling off this particular entire huge plot of land. I'll give you one more in this same particular context. I give you one more example. Supposingly I had a huge particular plot of land, huge land. Now I also know that this is my only chance or the golden chance to earn huge particular sum of money. So let me in fact ensure that I do the activity in such a way that I will be in a position to earn a super profit. So then what I decide? Then I start making a plan. And therefore I divide the property in various phases, say 4 phases. Phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, phase 4. In phase 1, I allocate my plots for the residential construction of only residential property. That is, in this plot which I have made available in my phase 1, only the residential property would be constructed. And therefore I made that particular that much parcel of the land available for the purpose of sale, but only for construction of the residential property. And I have also demarcated the plot, this size plot, medium size plot, large size plot. That is how it was being demarcated, and accordingly it was being allowed for the sale. The moment the sale happened, thereafter I came up with the second and third phase, which was about the commercial complexes, and thereafter say the hospitals and other particular facilities and all. that was in my second and third phase. Schools, hospitals, and all these were commercial complexes. These were in my second and third phase. And in the fourth phase, the plot which I have kept at the fourth phase, that was meant for a super luxury projects. Super luxury projects was in the fourth phase. So therefore, that way I have disposed of the entire piece of land. So in this regard, if I have disposed, in this case also I have disposed of the land, but what I have disposed is the plots of land, and therefore, and that too, I had carried out my activity in systematic manner. I have carried out the activity in a systematic manner by applying my skill, labor and resources with a view to earn profit thereon. And therefore, in this particular situation, as distinguished with the case of Suresh Chandra Goyal, we can say that in this situation there is a clear cut of business that the SSC is conducting. Even though this may be an adventure, that is to say, after this entire land is sold, the SSC may not pursue any transaction in real estate for rest of his life. Doesn't matter, it shall still be considered as a business, because that particular activity was being conducted by the SSC in a systematic manner by applying his skill, labor and intelligence with a view to earn profit. This is what you mean by the term trade. And even if it is an adventure, but because it is in the nature of trade, it will qualify as business, and hence in this case it will be charged under the head PGBP. But not in the case of, so students, it is not Sunil Chand, sorry, it is Suresh Chand. Suresh Chandra Goyal, but not in the case of Suresh Chandra Goyal, because in the case of Suresh Chandra Goyal, you all are aware that what has happened. Suresh Chandra Goyal, in this particular case law, what has happened was that the SSC had a huge plot of land, and there is an absence of a systematic activity for the purpose of sale. Whatever he sold was sold at what the buyer required in this plot, and therefore there was no plan beforehand for the purpose of the activity, and therefore we can say that the chargeability will be under the head what? Under the head capital gains, and not under the head PGBP. Under the head capital gains and not under the head PGBP. Okay, so students, let's start with this particular part. In this context, I'll make you write a couple of quick points herein. Please write. Brief facts. I'll just make you write this brief facts. The SSC has inherited a huge plot of land The SSC has inherited a huge plot of land from his father. Due to its size, he was finding it difficult to sell. The entire portion of land and hence he decided to sell the land in plots as per students, underline the word land in plots, as per the requirement of the buyer. Next line. The SSE had classified the income under the head CG, whereas the department sought to classify the income under the head PGVP. Fine, students. So now, students, in this context, let's look upon to the relevant provision. So the relevant provision herein, first of all, point number 1. The term business here in P is right. Business is defined under section 2 clause 13 to mean a trade, commerce and manufacture, and it includes any adventure in the nature of trade, commerce and manufacture. Next line. Even though the term business includes trade, commerce, even though the term business includes, students, even though the term business includes adventure, comma, it's only the adventure in the nature of trade, commerce, it's only the adventure in the nature of trade, commerce and manufacture that shall constitute business. Therefore, the term business include business, the term business implies now students, I'm writing this, breaking it down into 3 sub points so that you are also in a position to write in the same way in your examination. It's actually one sentence only, but to ensure that you remember this one of the most critical definition in a proper sequence, and you will be also be in a position to write it in the examination the way it has been given. Please take a note of it like this. Therefore, the term business implies an activity carried out in a systematic manner by applying skill, labor and resources with a view to earn profit thereon. It's one sentence, but I've split into 3 subparts so as to facilitate that's it, memory, so that you at the end of the day you have to remember as well, isn't it? So we have to facilitate that particular part as well. We just cannot be casual in the approach. So therefore, the term business implies an activity carried out in a systematic manner by applying skill, labor and resources with a view to earn the profit thereon. This particular activity which you have classified now, this particular activity, if it satisfies these tests, which will be considered as business. Okay, so relevant provision and some like I told you earlier also, students, I'm repeating it again. I told you earlier also that just only to write the definition will not be appropriate. Please write something more. And here what we are writing is what the term business finally implies. What the term business finally implies. This is what we have mentioned over here. After this analysis, in the present case, there was no systematic activity which was being carried out by the SSC. In the present case, there was no systematic activity which was being carried out by the SSC as the main intention was only to sell the land. Therefore, the land was being disposed in plots based on the requirement of the buyer. Conclusion. Since what was being sold was land in plots and not plots of land, comma. Therefore, the gain arising on such transfer shall be charged under the head capital gains. Okay, students. See, what was being sold was land in plots. Can you appreciate this difference? And not plots of land. Had I, in my particular example, which if you remember this thing, wherein I was doing a systematic activity. I was doing what? A systematic activity. Phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, phase 4. That I could have said what I am selling now is not land in plots, but what I am selling is the plots of land. So in that case study which I have tried, which was not this one, this case law was inheritance of the land, he wanted to sell the land. But the case study which I have introduced in between, wherein I told you that look, his focus was to, if the focus was to earn a fortune, and for which he undertook a plan, a project was in place, how he is going to deal with this entire portion of his land, then what essentially he is selling is not land in plots, but what he is essentially selling is the plot of land, because each plot he has designed for a purpose of sale, and that is what he is offering to the customer. That is what he is offering to the customer. Here the land was an offer to the customer, and the customer is coming and they are taking out a plot out of the land. This is the difference between the two. I hope that you have got hold with this very critical judgment which I have discussed with all of you. So in this case now, students, what we have seen, the interplay between which head, CG and PGBP. A wrong classification will lead to a wrong computation in that head, and finally a wrong total income, eventually a wrong tax liability. So that is why the proper classification is our first step in the computation of the total income. But definitely computation of which total income? The qualifying income, isn't it? So make no mistake to take your eyes off from the qualifying income. What you are computing is the qualifying income, for which the classification is the first step, and once the classification is done in the appropriate head based on the specific charge and the general charge theory, thereafter I shall compute the qualifying income so classified in the appropriate head as per the rules of the computation of each and every heads of income. After that, students, what you do? 5 heads of income are there, isn't it? 5 heads of income are there. You have classified in all 5 heads of income. After that, what you do? All 5 heads of income is through. Then what comes next? What comes next after 5 heads of income? So first head is salary, section 15. Last is IFOs. So if you see herein the computation, students, I'll just give a quick remark herein. You can put it in the bracket. So computation of total income that you are doing herein, in this context. In this situation, the heads of income that you can find out from section 15 to section 59. After that, students, after the heads of income is through, all the heads of income is done with it, then thereafter from section 60 to section 65, it is a clubbing provision, students, that comes into play, isn't it? clubbing provisions that comes into play. So clubbing provision. Now this is starting from 60, as I told you, 60 to 65. Now there is one point which I just wanted to mention to all of you. Students, as far as the clubbing provision is concerned, why clubbing provision is introduced? Students, the clubbing provision is a specific anti-avoidance rule. What I have said, repeat with me. It is what? It is a specific anti-avoidance rule. Meaning thereby, the assessee has through the tax law loopholes, he has sought to undertake a tax avoidance measure. He sought to undertake a tax avoidance measure. You will say, sir, how the tax avoidance measure is achieved? That is achieved by two things. This is one of the simplest tax avoidance measure which I can say. Students, if you know, for the individual and HUF, AOP, BOI, artificial juridical person, for all these category of the person, there is a slab rate. First of all, they enjoy the basic exemption limit, and thereafter what? There is a slab which is applicable in respect of the same, isn't it? So basic exemption limit, and then there is a slab rates which comes thereafter. So easily people can try to split their income in such a way that they can try to avoid their tax liability. Now what they do, like 10 lakhs is my total income. Now I will tell the payer of the amount to split the check into two, 5 and 5. 5 in my name, 5 in the name of my spouse. And by doing so, both of them are enjoying what? 2.5 lakhs basic income limit. Thereafter, only at 5% the tax is being charged, and maybe 87A rebate is also there. So considering each of it, I finally be successful to have a nil tax liability. Not a success through legitimate mean, because the motive was to avoid my taxes, and therefore I did the splitting, and to ensure to target such tax avoidance measure that there is a specific anti-avoidance rule in the form of clubbing provision. Specific, repeat with me, specific anti-avoidance rule in the form of a clubbing provision. So this, what I have said, is a specific anti-avoidance rule. What is this full form? SAR, specific anti-avoidance rule. There is one very important topic for your CA final, which is general anti-avoidance rule. Have you heard of that thing? The GAR provision. Right now, just take a pause, and again I am repeating this. This is going to target the specific cases of tax avoidance resorted by individual HUF, AOP, BOI, artificial juridical person, to target those specific cases that the specific anti-avoidance rule from section 60 to 65 would be invoked. And the major motivation of all these assessee, all this category of the assessee, is that they know that there is a basic exemption limit and the slab rates are also progressive. That gives them the motivation to avoid the tax liability, and therefore to target this tax avoidance scheme resorted by these category of the assessee, that the clubbing provisions are being introduced. Students, you would know one thing, that in your IPCC, whatever clubbing provision that you would have learned, there is no such clubbing provision that is invoked for a partnership firm or for a company. Whatever is a clubbing provision that you have learned is necessarily in relation to the first category only. Why is it so? Why partnership firm? Why not a company? They have certain clubbing provision because the tax rate is static. There is no basic exemption limit, and these are the reason why this sort of tax avoidance measure, which can be exercised by a particular class of a person, cannot be exercised by the other class of the person. That is the reason. So this is precisely what you learned. So what I said, SAR, it's a specific anti-avoidance rule, and I have already told you in my earlier class also, between a specific charge and general charge, specific always prevail. So same way, between a SAR versus a GAR, SAR versus a GAR, it is a SAR that will be prevailed over the GAR provision. Why? Specific always will prevail over the general provision. I have already told you earlier. And just keep those perspective in mind. Did you all got this one, students? Fine. So this is your clubbing provision. Again, this also we are going to do with it, but in your last module. In your last module, all these IPCC related topic, we are going to capture it. So clubbing provision. Later on, after clubbing, now there are some provision of 66 to 69D, which is we will discuss in the search and all. Right now, I'm not bothered to address this. After this, students, you enter into section 70 to section 79 or to section 80, which is about set off or carry forward and set off of losses. Set off or carry forward or set off of losses. Now this is to be reduced to finally get you to what? To get you to the GTI. So as to get you what? The final result is the GTI. Now in this context, by the way, why set off is done? Why set off is done? Any idea for the set off? Think over it, maybe, and maybe in the WhatsApp group you can just let me know. An enriching discussion we can have about the set off provision. So just let me know. I can just have a thought over your thoughts in this case from IPCC, and then maybe in my next lecture at the first start 5 minutes or so, I'll give you some bit of inputs about the set off thing. Okay, but let me have a discourse with all of you before you see the next class in your WhatsApp group, your reasonings and all. Okay. Minus from this chapter 6a. Once you after set off and carry forward, you reduce the chapter 6a. So students, here is a deduction of chapter 6a. So there are deductions that you get in the heads of income as well, and outside the heads of income also there is a separate chapter 6a deduction. Students, this deduction is to the person, whereas deduction in these heads, primarily all the heads of income, deduction is to the source. Deduction to the source. Difference you can easily appreciate. To the source means any expenditure which is incurred for the purpose of business and profession, isn't it? So therefore it is very clear that the deduction of the expenditure is in respect of the source. The deduction that we are looking out for is a deduction in respect of the source. Whereas what about here a deduction? Nature of deductions? It is to whom? To the person and not to the source. ATC, ATD, to whom you are giving the deduction? Are you giving it to the person or to the source? It is given to the, to what? To the person, not to the source, isn't it? This students deduction when we will do, we'll split it into two parts. One, deduction on expenditure, on payment, deduction on payment. Another is deduction on expenditure, and the third one, students, profit linked deduction. So you'll see the payment and expenditure, we will see as and when it will come. Don't worry about this. But profit linked deduction, this part is these are the big section, students, like ATIA and all these stuff. These are some of the big sections which are there. This I'm going to use and I'll be going to doing it in my PGBP itself. All the profit linked deductions we are going to capture it in the PGBP itself, because they are all having the great nexus with the profit and gains of the business and profession. Eligible business gets that eligible deduction, and therefore knowing the kind of the importance which is there for this particular deduction, we will merge it with the PGBP, and that exactly what you are going to find in module number 2. In the second module itself, students, you are going to find this profit link deduction that we are going to indulge into it. Now in this regard, students, so therefore after doing this deduction, finally what you get is the total income. Total income of the person, for the relevant previous year, computed as per the law laid down as on 1st of April of the relevant AY, as per the law laid down as on 1st of April of the relevant AY. Fine students, this is exactly where we are now, and that is now going to unfold our next lecture, which you are going to do unfold our head. And now we are right ready for our head, which is the head PGBP. I told you students that the books are being dispatched, it is in the transit. So what I can now do would be that I will be giving you the PDF file for this first topic, which is the PGBP herein. So I'll be giving you the PDF file. In the meantime, while the book are coming to your particular this thing. So therefore, in the next class, before the next class, in your respective WhatsApp group, I'll circulate to you primarily the PDF file. Again, I'm repeating students, get it yourself connected. If you are not in any of the groups or so, in this number, tell them to make you connected in the WhatsApp group. Okay, and second is my number, but again only for WhatsApp purpose you are going to do it. Fine students, see you then in the next class. Thank you very much. Please keep revising, it's important. All of you, please keep revising. Yes, Anil, matching concept is the scenario.